Ma'am, I've worked this desk for 8 years, and let me tell you, I know exactly what kind of people book the presidential suite, and it's not people like you. That's what he said. No hesitation, no embarrassment. Just a cold, quiet insult wrapped in a forced smile. He glanced at her ID again and added, "You might want to check the address on this, because either someone made a mistake, or you're trying to check into a room that was never meant for someone in your situation. Now, unless you want security involved, I suggest you step aside and stop wasting our time." And that, right there, was the moment the entire story began to turn, the moment the mask slipped, and the room fell quiet. Before we go on, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. If you believe in dignity and accountability, hit like. It helps more people see stories like this. And subscribe for more true stories that expose the truth. Now, back to that lobby. It was 3:28 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon. The Stanton Regal Hotel in downtown Chicago was everything you'd expect from a luxury property. Gleaming marble floors, golden elevators, soft piano music in the background, and a scent in the air that whispered money. The kind of place where people don't raise their voices, and service comes with scripted smiles. And that afternoon, Dr. Naomi Carter walked in, alone, poised, dressed in a sleek black pantsuit with polished flats and a silver watch. She didn't wear jewelry that screamed status, but she didn't need to. Her confidence was quiet, but unmistakable. She was the founder and CEO of Carter Global Ventures, a powerhouse investment firm based in California. But here, at this front desk, she was just a black woman with a reservation. She rolled her carry-on bag up to the counter and offered a simple, polite greeting. "Good afternoon. I have a reservation under Dr. Naomi Carter, Presidential Suite." Behind the counter was David Huxley, the front desk manager, mid to late 30s, sharp haircut, stiff posture, and a voice trained to sound helpful, until it didn't. He gave her a quick once-over, then tapped into the computer. "Presidential suite?" he repeated, like she must have misspoken. "Yes," Naomi confirmed calmly. "3 nights. Reserved last week through your executive concierge." He nodded slowly, then asked for her ID and the card on file. She passed him her California driver's license and a black titanium corporate card, the kind that doesn't have a limit. He looked at the card, then at her, then back at the ID. He paused, turned it sideways, held it up to the light. His smile tightened. And then came the words you heard earlier. "I know exactly what kind of people book the presidential suite. And it's not people like you." Naomi blinked once. Just once. But her posture never shifted. David continued, as if rehearsed. "We've had issues with people using borrowed IDs before. I'll need to verify this. Just a routine security check." He didn't ask for permission. He just turned and walked away, taking her ID with him. Naomi didn't move, but her eyes followed him, and around her. Other guests were being checked in without delay. In fact, a white man in a golf polo had just handed his ID to another receptionist, a young Asian woman named Ellen Chen, and was already being offered a glass of champagne. Naomi watched. No one questioned his credentials. No one inspected his card. No one talked about calling security. Just smiles, laughter, and key cards. A minute later, another staff member emerged from the back. Cara Monroe, the head of guest relations. Blonde hair pulled tight, expensive shoes, voice soft but clipped. "Hi, I'm Cara. I understand there's been a small delay with your check-in." Naomi turned toward her. "Small? Your staff just walked off with my ID after accusing me of using someone else's name." Cara gave a polished smile. "I'm sure that wasn't the intent. Sometimes we need to confirm high-tier reservations for suites of this level." Naomi nodded. Is that why the man behind me was offered champagne within 30 seconds of walking in? Kara glanced at Ellen, who lowered her eyes. That's different, Kara replied. He's a regular guest, Naomi replied sharply. I'm a shareholder in the investment group that owns 3 of your sister properties. But sure, let's call him the priority. Kara's smile faded just slightly. If you'd prefer, I can escort you to our guest lounge while we sort things out. Complimentary refreshments. Of course. Naomi's voice dropped lower, not louder. No, I'll stay right here, in full view of everyone, because what's happening is bigger than a room key. By this point, other guests had started to notice. A woman sitting on a leather couch pulled out her phone and tilted it slightly. Camera pointed toward the front desk. A man in a suit, checking in nearby, paused to listen. Even Marcus Bryant, a black security officer stationed near the elevators, adjusted his stance. He'd seen this before, not in training manuals, but in real life. And Naomi? She didn't move. She didn't demand. She didn't raise her voice. She just stood there, quietly, waiting, watching, holding every ounce of dignity that so many tried to deny her. Because what none of them realized, not David, not Kara, not even the manager watching from behind the glass, was that this woman wasn't just another guest. She was the storm they didn't see coming, and the clock had already started counting down. Behind the frosted glass door that read, Staff Only. David Huxley held Naomi Carter's ID like it was radioactive. He wasn't scanning it, not really. He was staring at it, almost daring it to prove him wrong. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. But the screen in front of him didn't matter. This wasn't about verifying a reservation. This was about justifying a bias he didn't know how to name. Behind him, Kara Monroe stepped in, closing the door softly and lowering her voice. What did she say when you took the ID? She asked. David shrugged. She didn't say much, but she gave me that look. Kara raised an eyebrow. What look? David smirked. That, I know I'm better than you look. He dropped Naomi's license on the desk like it was a playing card that didn't win the hand. I'm telling you, something's off. Kara leaned in slightly, tapping her manicured nails on the countertop. We need to be careful. There are guests in the lobby. Cameras. David scoffed. She doesn't have a leg to stand on. If it turns out she's lying, I'll be the one who gets congratulated for catching it before it became a mess. Kara didn't reply. Not right away. Her face was unreadable, but her silence spoke volumes. She wasn't worried about the reservation. She was worried about how this would look, especially if they were wrong. And that silence, that subtle calculation, would soon matter more than they realized. Back in the lobby, Naomi stood still, arms folded, eyes scanning the front desk calmly. The moment hadn't passed. It had deepened. She wasn't just waiting. She was observing, measuring, testing. She could feel the ripple of discomfort starting to spread across the room. People were watching, some quietly recording, others pretending not to notice but clearly alert. The front desk staff were quieter now. Ellen Chen, the junior associate working 3 terminals down, glanced at Naomi, then back at her screen. She had seen what happened, heard what David said, and something in her gut was twisting. A week earlier, she had attended a Women in Leadership virtual conference, and one of the speakers, articulate, powerful, unshakably calm, had been Dr. Naomi Carter. She remembered her story, her voice, the way she spoke about accountability and quiet power. And now, that same woman was being treated like an intruder in a place she had every right to be. Ellen's heart was pounding. She looked down at the check-in queue but couldn't focus. Every click of her keyboard felt heavier. She wasn't new to microaggressions, but she had never seen one unfold this plainly, this publicly. Still, she hesitated. She was only a junior associate, probationary period, bills to pay. Her mother had warned her, "Keep your head down, keep your job." So for now, she stayed silent, but her silence was cracking, slowly, quietly, like glass under pressure, near the elevators. Marcus Bryant shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He was tall, solid, and dressed in the standard black suit issued to hotel security. He had seen situations escalate before, mostly when someone got loud, or drunk, or belligerent. Naomi had done none of those things. She wasn't yelling, she wasn't causing a scene. And yet, there was tension in the air, not because of her, but because of what was being done to her. Marcus had worked long enough to know when a guest was being profiled. He also knew the script that came next: delay, deflect, blame the system, offer the lounge, and if the guest pushed back, call for backup. And that made him uneasy, because from what he could see, Naomi wasn't a threat. She was the only one in the lobby behaving like she had nothing to prove. In the back room, David tapped the ID into the system again. Nothing was wrong with it. That much he knew. The address matched. The license wasn't expired. The corporate card had cleared. But still, something about her irritated him. He wasn't used to being questioned, and Naomi hadn't said anything rude. But her silence had unsettled him. She had looked at him like he wasn't in control, and that bruised his ego. Kara stood behind him, arms folded, staring at the ID like it was a test she couldn't pass. "What if she's legit?" she asked, almost whispering. David didn't answer, because deep down, he already knew. Back out front, Kara returned to the lobby alone. She smiled at Naomi again, this time tighter, forced. "Still verifying. Just another minute," she said. Naomi didn't move, didn't blink. "You've had 5. Her tone was cool, level, but it cut sharper than any shout. "That's 4 more than I've ever seen you take with your white guests." Kara's face flushed slightly, but she kept her voice light. "I understand this is frustrating, but we have protocols." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Then apply them fairly. I'm not here for an exception. I'm here for equality." Kara hesitated, but before she could answer, a voice spoke up from behind the counter. "Ellen." "Excuse me," she said, voice trembling slightly, but steadying with each word. I recognize her. She's not lying. That's Dr. Naomi Carter. She's a keynote speaker, an executive. Kara shot her a look, but Ellen didn't back down. "You can look her up. She runs Carter Global Ventures. She's one of the hotel group's investors." Kara's expression darkened. David had just stepped out from the back room, holding the ID like it burned his fingers. "Is there a problem here?" he asked. Naomi turned toward him slowly. "Yes," she said, "but it's not mine. Not anymore." The air in the lobby thickened. Marcus straightened his jacket. Ellen stepped back from the desk, eyes wide but unashamed, and David finally saw what he had done. Naomi didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was doing the heavy lifting. She stood there with the patience of someone who'd learned long ago that real power doesn't rush. It waits, watches, and speaks only when it's ready. David, now visibly uncomfortable, held her ID in his hand like he wasn't sure what to do with it. His confidence had faltered, and for the first time since she entered the lobby, he wasn't looking at her with disdain. He was looking at her with uncertainty. Kara stepped in, trying to salvage what little authority she still held. "Dr. Carter," she said carefully, "we do apologize for the confusion. This just isn't a typical check-in. and our system didn't recognize your reservation credentials. I'd be happy to escort you to the executive lounge while we reprocess." But Naomi didn't move an inch. Her voice was calm, clipped, and razor-sharp. "You want to move me away from the public space," she said, "so you can minimize the damage this situation might cause your reputation. I won't give you that out." Her words hung in the air, slicing through the polite facade that Kara tried so hard to maintain. "Let me be very clear," Naomi continued. "You accused me, without justification, of using a fake ID. You took my property without consent. And now, after humiliating me in front of your guests, you're asking me to quietly disappear into a side lounge? No." She turned her full attention to David. "Return my ID. Now." David hesitated. The balance of power had shifted, and he could feel it. Every eye in the lobby was now watching, not just observing, but judging. And unlike before, those eyes weren't siding with him. Ellen, who had spoken up moments earlier, remained frozen behind the counter, her heart pounding in her chest. She'd stepped into something bigger than she expected, and she knew there would be consequences. But for the first time in her short career, she didn't care, because deep down, she knew what she did was right. And when Naomi glanced at her, just briefly, there was a silent thank you in that look. Not loud, not performative, just real. Marcus, standing tall near the elevator, adjusted his earpiece out of habit. He wasn't taking orders yet, but he was watching, waiting. If anyone escalated things further, his job would be on the line. But for now, he wasn't stepping in. He didn't have to. Naomi was holding her own. David finally placed the ID back on the counter. He tried to sound neutral, but the edge in his voice betrayed him. "We're still unable to locate your booking under this name in the suite system." Naomi didn't even flinch. She reached into her phone and pulled up her email. Crisp, organized, professional. She tapped once, twice, then held the screen toward him. "Reservation confirmation," she said. "Executive concierge, Stanton Regal Holdings, 3 nights, presidential suite, paid in full." David barely glanced at it. "It must not have synced with our internal system," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Kara jumped in again. "That does happen sometimes when bookings come through the ownership side instead of the guest services department." Naomi gave a slight, tired smile, not out of amusement, but out of sheer disbelief. "So now it's a systems issue?" she asked. "Tell me something. Did it happen to the guest ahead of me? The gentleman in the golf polo who got his key and champagne in under 2 minutes?" Kara's expression faltered. "No," she admitted. "He's a regular." Naomi didn't press it. She didn't need to. The point had already been made, loud and clear. At that moment, the general manager, Rachel Gordon, finally emerged. Middle-aged, clean-cut, blazer tailored perfectly, and a demeanor crafted over decades in luxury hospitality. She walked toward the counter with a calm stride, already briefed by phone but visibly tense. "Good afternoon," she said to Naomi, extending a hand. "I'm Rachel, general manager here. I understand there's been some kind of issue." Naomi didn't shake her hand. She simply nodded. "Yes," she replied. "And I'd like to know why your staff believed my ID was fake, why they walked off with it, and why I've been standing here for over 10 minutes while lesser rooms are handed out like candy to every white guest in line." Rachel opened her mouth to respond, but Naomi wasn't done. "I've been patient. I've been quiet. I've followed every instruction. And still, I was met with suspicion, delay, and disrespect. I don't want a tour. I don't want a cocktail. I don't want excuses. I want an answer." Rachel glanced quickly at Kara and David, who were now visibly shaken. I'd like to speak with you in private if I may. Rachel said, There's a meeting space off the lobby. No, Naomi said firmly. You will not move me into a side room. We're having this conversation here, right where the harm happened. There was no yelling, no slamming of fists, but the silence that followed was louder than anything a voice could have delivered. Guests around the room were no longer pretending not to listen. A few had stopped what they were doing entirely. One man even lowered his laptop screen and watched with a sense of growing discomfort. Because what had started as a misunderstanding was now something else, something deeper. A line had been drawn. Naomi was no longer just defending her reservation. She was standing up for every person who'd been quietly dismissed, doubted, or diminished in places that claimed to value excellence. Rachel seemed to recognize this, and for a moment, her posture softened. She looked around the room, then back at Naomi. Would you give me a moment to speak with my team? She asked quietly. Naomi nodded, but her voice remained even. I'm not going anywhere, so take your moment. Then we're going to talk about what happens next, because this isn't over, not by a long shot. The moment Rachel walked away, the air in the Stanton Regal lobby thickened like a summer storm ready to snap. Naomi remained exactly where she stood, not out of stubbornness, but because she understood something no one behind that desk seemed to grasp. Visibility is power. And sometimes, dignity doesn't move out of the way. She stood tall, composed, eyes forward, knowing full well the weight of stares gathering around her. What started as a private insult was now a public reckoning. Guests in suits pretended to scroll their phones, but their ears were wide open. A mother in yoga pants held her daughter's hand tighter and glanced over. Even the pianist in the corner slowed his tempo, sensing the change in tone. And it was then, in that quiet tension, that Ellen Chen, the youngest person behind the counter, barely 2 months into the job, took a step forward. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't stop moving. She cleared her throat, once, and then said it. Not loudly, but clearly enough to slice through the hum of soft jazz and discomfort. I know who she is, Ellen said. Her voice cracked on the first word, but steadied as she continued. That's Dr. Naomi Carter. She's the CEO of Carter Global Ventures. I watched her keynote last month. Women in leadership. She's not lying. That ID is real. She belongs here. For a split second, time stopped. No one moved. David Huxley, standing behind the desk, turned toward Ellen as if she'd cursed in church. Excuse me, he said, low and sharp. Kara, who had just rejoined the group after a hushed conversation with Rachel, snapped her head in Ellen's direction. That's not your place, she said coldly. But Ellen didn't retreat. Actually, she replied, voice stronger now. It is. Because I've watched you all pretend there's nothing wrong with how she's been treated. I've worked check-in for weeks, and I've never once seen you walk someone's ID to the back unless you thought they didn't belong. The honesty in her tone landed hard. Kara's face flushed. David clenched his jaw. We were following protocol, he muttered. Ellen shook her head. No, you were following a pattern. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was loud. A silence made of shame, of unspoken truths finally being said out loud by the one person they never expected would speak. Marcus Bryant, the hotel security guard, took a slow step forward. Until now. He had stayed still, quiet in his uniform, playing the role of neutral presence. But something in Ellen's words reached him. He'd spent years walking this lobby, years watching who got extra smiles and who got extra scrutiny. And as much as he tried to stay out of trouble, he knew what he was seeing. I saw the way she was treated, Marcus said, voice deep but steady. I was standing right there. Nobody should be talked to like that. Not here. Not anywhere. Kara turned, flustered. Marcus, please. This isn't your concern. But Marcus didn't back down. It became my concern when you called me over the radio and told me to be ready in case she got difficult. She wasn't difficult. You were. The words fell heavy, and for the first time, the authority in the room didn't belong to management. It belonged to truth. Rachel returned then, eyes scanning the lobby, instantly catching the shift. She looked at Kara, then at Marcus, and then at Ellen, and Naomi. The entire room felt it. The balance of control had shifted. Naomi finally spoke, not with anger, but with quiet, pointed clarity. There are moments in life where silence becomes complicity, and then there are moments when someone, just one voice, decides enough is enough. She looked at Ellen. Thank you for your voice. Ellen looked like she might cry, but nodded instead. Standing tall, Naomi turned to Marcus. And thank you for not letting that radio define who you protect. Marcus gave a short, respectful nod. Rachel stepped closer now, choosing her words carefully. Dr. Carter, I've just spoken with the executive office. Your reservation was processed through the investment group's internal channel, which doesn't sync directly with the lobby desk. That's why the booking didn't appear in our system at first. I'm very sorry for how this was handled. Naomi listened, eyes steady. You're sorry for the system, but I want to know, are you sorry for how your people behaved once I walked through those doors? Rachel hesitated, then nodded. Yes, she said quietly. I am. And what? Naomi asked. Do you plan to do about it? Rachel glanced at Kara and David. Kara looked away. David pretended to adjust something on the monitor, but it was Amir Patel, a man no one had noticed in the lobby until now, who stepped forward next. A well-dressed, soft-spoken South Asian man in his early 40s. He carried the quiet authority of someone who didn't speak unless it mattered. Excuse me, Amir said. I'm part of the ownership group behind this property. I've been watching from the lounge, and I can confirm that what I witnessed today doesn't reflect the values this company claims to stand for. He turned to Naomi. Dr. Carter, I know who you are, and I know that when you walk into one of our hotels, you're not just a guest, you're an investor, a partner. What happened here today? That's not just a service failure. That's a betrayal. Naomi didn't smile. She didn't need to. Then let's fix it, she said. Rachel stepped in quickly. We'll begin disciplinary review immediately. There will be accountability. Naomi raised a brow. Will there be change? Rachel swallowed. There will be. Naomi looked around the room, then down at her ID, still sitting where David had dropped it. She picked it up slowly, brushed off the countertop dust, and placed it in her wallet. The moment felt quiet again, but it wasn't the silence of before. It was the silence that comes after something breaks, and just before something better is built. Naomi let the silence settle just long enough to make everyone feel it. Then, slowly, deliberately, she pulled her phone from her pocket, tapped once, then held it to her ear. Her voice was quiet, steady, almost emotionless, but what she said sent chills through the air. Michael, she said, pausing, activate the shutdown clause on Stanton Regal Holdings. Immediate execution. And just like that, every face at the front desk changed. Kara froze. David's complexion turned 3 shades lighter. Rachel blinked hard, like she'd misheard. And Amir, who had stayed quietly to the side, straightened his posture with sudden interest. Naomi hung up the phone and placed it on the counter as if she were done ordering coffee. Her demeanor hadn't shifted at all, but the room felt like it had tilted sideways. Rachel stepped forward cautiously. Dr. Carter, excuse me. What do you mean, shutdown clause? Naomi turned her gaze toward her, calm but sharp. It means that this location, this entire property, is about to undergo an emergency operational freeze, effective now. She didn't raise her voice, but her words rang like a judge's gavel. Under the terms of the acquisition agreement Carter Global Ventures made last year, any instance of confirmed discriminatory behavior, especially involving an investor, triggers an immediate rights reassignment. I now control 62% of Stanton Regal's operating vote. As of this moment, your authority here is suspended. David looked like someone had punched the air out of his lungs. You're the Carter behind the holding company? He asked, voice cracking. Naomi didn't look at him. The same Carter whose ID you called fake. The one you tried to dismiss from the presidential suite? Yes. That Carter. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Kara stepped in, trying to gather the pieces. Dr. Carter, please, there's no need to escalate things this far. We can handle this with an internal review. The staff will be retrained. We'll update our bias protocols. Naomi cut in, voice firm but not loud. Retraining does not erase what happened. This isn't just about you, or him, or the system you're both so comfortable hiding behind. This is about the hundreds of people like me who walk into places like this and are treated as threats instead of clients. Kara looked around, visibly shrinking under the weight of her own reflection. She no longer sounded confident. She sounded small. We didn't mean to offend anyone, she whispered. Naomi turned toward her and said, slowly, you didn't mean to get caught. At that moment, the lobby doors opened, and a man in a navy blue suit entered, crisp tie, briefcase in hand, moving with purpose. Michael Reed, he said, introducing himself as he approached Naomi. Legal counsel, Carter Global. He opened the briefcase and pulled out a thin leather folder, placing it on the counter in front of Rachel. Inside is the notice of temporary suspension of operations for Stanton Regal Chicago, pending a full-scale equity and compliance audit. Dr. Carter's authority under the equity restructuring clause takes immediate effect. Rachel opened the folder, scanned the papers, and slowly set it down, her face draining of color. This can't be happening, she murmured. Michael replied plainly. It is. Kara turned to Rachel. You knew they had controlling interest? Rachel nodded stiffly. I didn't know it was her. Naomi spoke up, still cool and measured. You never thought it could be someone like me, and that's the real problem. By now, the guests in the lobby were no longer pretending not to listen. Phones were out. Video was rolling. A hotel that prided itself on controlled image and elite service had just become the stage for a corporate reckoning, and no one could stop it. Amir Patel stepped forward again. Dr. Carter, he said respectfully, on behalf of the ownership board, I want to say clearly, we support your decision. We failed to uphold the standards we promised. We stand with your leadership, and we'll support this transition fully. Naomi nodded once. It wasn't vindictive. It was business. Thank you. Mr. Patel, please have your team begin the public notification process. I'll have my office draft the internal statement for staff and guests. Rachel finally broke the spell of stunned silence. What about the employees? She asked. The ones who weren't involved? Naomi didn't hesitate. They will be evaluated fairly, but the individuals responsible, and those who stood by silently, will face consequences. Silence in the face of injustice is not neutrality. It's participation. David looked up then, almost pleading. You're going to fire me over a misunderstanding? Naomi looked him in the eye, her expression completely unreadable. I'm going to fire you for being exactly who you revealed yourself to be the moment you looked at my ID and decided it wasn't good enough. Kara opened her mouth, but then closed it again, realizing no apology would come close to repairing what she'd broken. Michael gathered the documents, and Naomi took one last look around the room, not out of anger, but as a quiet farewell to the illusion she'd allowed them to hold on to for far too long. She turned to Marcus, the security guard who had said little but watched everything. "Thank you for staying still," she said simply. "You didn't escalate. You didn't enable. You let the truth breathe." Marcus nodded, visibly moved. "I've seen things like this before," he said, "but never seen one end like this." Naomi gave him a look that was soft, almost maternal. "That's because most of them don't. But this one will." She turned back to the front desk. "Effective immediately. This property will close for internal restructuring. Refunds will be issued, new leadership will be installed, and when it reopens, if it reopens, it will do so with a new name and a new standard." The entire room was still. No one moved. No one even breathed too loudly. Because they all knew. They had just witnessed a moment people don't forget. The day a woman walked in, was questioned, was insulted, and quietly shut down everything they thought they controlled. There was no applause, no dramatic music, just stillness, the kind that happens after an earthquake. When the dust is still floating but everything underneath has already shifted, Naomi stood at the center of it, not triumphant, but resolute. She didn't need to gloat. She didn't even look angry. That was what made the moment land so much harder. The power in her calm. She turned back toward Rachel, who still stood near the front desk, eyes flicking between Naomi, the legal documents, and the stunned staff members beside her. "Rachel," Naomi said, her tone measured, "I understand you weren't directly involved in how this situation unfolded, but you watched most of it happen. You stood by while your team humiliated me. You saw it, and you chose silence. I want to be clear. Silence is a decision, and in leadership, silence speaks louder than action." Rachel swallowed, nodded slightly. "I accept that," she said. "I failed." Naomi gave no comfort, no reassurance, only the truth. "Your suspension is effective immediately," she said. "You'll receive formal notice by the end of the day. A transitional manager will be assigned within the hour." Rachel didn't argue. She simply stepped back, folded her hands in front of her, and lowered her gaze. Her career didn't end in screams. It ended in realization. Next was Kara. She stood rigid, her hands clenched behind her back like a student waiting for punishment. But Naomi didn't deliver punishment. She delivered precision. "Kara Monroe," Naomi said evenly, "you orchestrated every excuse that followed the initial insult. You offered to move me out of sight. You gaslit, redirected, and downplayed what your team did. And when one of your own tried to speak truth, you tried to silence her." Kara opened her mouth, but Naomi raised one hand, just a finger. "Don't," she said softly. "Don't waste our time with a rehearsed apology." Kara's face tightened, and for a moment, the mask cracked. "You don't know what it's like," she snapped, unable to stop herself. "Trying to keep everyone calm, protect the image of the hotel." Naomi cut in. "You weren't protecting the image. You were protecting the lie." Kara's breath caught. She looked at Amir for help, but he gave her nothing, just a cool glance that said he agreed with everything Naomi had just said. "You're terminated effective immediately." Naomi continued. "Security will escort you to retrieve your things. Your employment history will reflect cause." Kara looked down, jaw tight, and stepped aside without another word. And then, finally, there was David, still standing behind the counter, hands flat on the marble as if trying to hold himself up. Naomi approached slowly. He didn't move. He just stared at her, wide-eyed, exposed, the way people do when they finally realize they've crossed the wrong person. Naomi spoke calmly, each word hitting like a bell in an empty church. "David Huxley," she said, "you didn't just question my ID. You questioned my existence. You looked me in the eye and decided I couldn't possibly be the person whose name was on that reservation. And then you treated me like a criminal for daring to say otherwise." David opened his mouth, stammered. I didn't mean—" "Yes," Naomi said. "You did. That's the problem. You meant every word. You said it with ease, with comfort, like it was routine." She leaned in slightly, not with threat, but with certainty. "And I'm guessing it was routine, just not with people who ever had the power to respond." His face collapsed. "I was just trying to protect hotel policy." "No," she said again, sharper this time. "You were trying to protect your assumption, and that assumption has cost you your job." She turned slightly, signaling to Marcus. "Escort him out. Please." David didn't resist. He just stood there, the weight of what he'd lost finally sinking in. As Marcus walked him toward the staff doors, a few guests moved aside silently, creating a path. No one clapped, no one jeered, but the message was clear. Justice had arrived, not with noise, but with weight. Naomi turned back toward the remaining staff, her tone softer now, but still grounded. "To everyone else who works here, you're not all responsible for what happened, but each of you saw it, heard it, felt it, and in that moment, you made a choice. Moving forward, this hotel will operate under new leadership, new standards, and a renewed commitment to dignity. Those who want to stay are welcome, but only if you're ready to unlearn what you've been taught to accept." A murmur rippled through the team. Some nodded, a few looked away, but no one objected. Naomi turned to Ellen then, still behind the desk, standing with her spine straight and her heart in her throat. "You," Naomi said, "took a risk. You spoke up when no one else would. And because of that, people listened. You didn't just help me. You changed the outcome." Ellen blinked fast, swallowing a wave of emotion. I couldn't stay quiet," she said. Naomi smiled, small and honest. "That's how every movement starts." From there, Naomi gave brief instructions to Michael, her legal counsel, and to Amir, who was already coordinating with the corporate office. The hotel would close for 72 hours to conduct a full review, reissue contracts, and release a formal public statement. All current bookings would be transferred to nearby partner hotels, at no cost. Guests who had witnessed the incident were offered full refunds, no NDAs, no silence payments. Naomi didn't want to sweep it under the rug. She wanted the stain left visible, so it could be remembered, so it wouldn't happen again. And just before she turned to leave, she paused, looked around the lobby, once a polished, pristine space, now cracked wide open with truth. Then she spoke one final time, her voice low but firm. "Let this be a reminder, to every business, every gatekeeper, every person who carries a clipboard and a smile. If your definition of professional only fits one type of face, you're not protecting standards, you're protecting bias. And eventually, someone will hold you accountable for it." With that, she walked out. No drama, no celebration, just dignity, wrapped in quiet fire. 3 days later, the Stanton Regal Hotel reopened its doors, but it didn't feel like the same place. The gold lettering had been removed from the glass. The oversized paintings of European estates that once lined the lobby walls were gone. The air was quieter, humbler. What remained was structure, marble, columns, light, and something else, accountability. That morning, Naomi Carter stood near the center of the newly restored lobby, not as a guest, not even as a CEO, but as a woman who had turned humiliation into reform. Cameras had gathered at a respectful distance, reporters whispered, Guests watched from behind coffee cups and check-in kiosks. And the staff, newly briefed, cautiously hopeful, stood off to the side, waiting to hear from the person who had nearly shut the place down, and now held its future in her hands. Naomi wore navy, clean and classic, her posture straight, her hands folded calmly in front of her. She didn't raise her voice, didn't try to command the room. She just spoke, clearly, firmly, truthfully. "I didn't come here for a fight," she began, pausing between sentences with intention. "I didn't wake up that morning expecting to be questioned, humiliated, or treated like an outsider. I came here to check into a room I paid for, a room I had every right to walk into without suspicion." She paused again. Her tone wasn't angry, it was honest, and that's what made people lean in. "But what I experienced wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't just about an ID. It was about perception, about who we think belongs where, and who we silently agree does not." Her eyes scanned the crowd. No one looked away. This place, she continued, like so many others, had created a culture that defined professionalism by skin tone, trustworthiness by clothing, and status by how someone looks. And when that culture was exposed, not by protest, not by shouting, but by stillness, it crumbled. She looked to the side, where Ellen Chen stood in the back, now promoted to front office coordinator. "But something else rose in its place," Naomi said. "Someone spoke up, and others stopped pretending not to see. And because of that, we get to build something better." She took a slow breath, then stepped slightly forward, eyes now on the staff. "Let me be clear," she said, her tone lowering just slightly, but with unmistakable weight. "Moving forward, this hotel, and every property under this brand, will operate under a new standard, not just in service, but in spirit. We will no longer prioritize comfort over truth. We will no longer trade discretion for discrimination. And we will no longer accept silence as neutrality. Not here. Not under my name." A ripple moved through the room. Some nodded. Others looked down, quietly processing, but no one rejected what they heard. Naomi continued, "Every staff member will undergo bias and equity training, not as a box to check, but as a conversation to keep open. Hiring practices will be restructured. Promotion reviews will include guest feedback, especially from those who often go unheard. And leadership," she said, glancing toward the upper mezzanine, "will be measured not just by efficiency, but by integrity." At that moment, Amir Patel stepped beside her, offering a nod of support. "The ownership board has voted to rename this property," he said, voice calm and steady. "It will no longer operate under the Stanton Regal brand. It will be reintroduced next month as the Carter House, a name that reflects not just one person, but a standard of equity, class, and courage." There were soft gasps in the audience. The rebrand was unexpected. Naomi looked down for a moment, then back up. "I didn't ask for that," she said quietly, "but I accept it, not for my name, but for what I want it to stand for." She paused once more, then added, with care, "This is not about me. This is about every person who's ever been made to feel like they didn't belong in a place they earned the right to be. This is for the woman who's followed every rule, worked twice as hard, and still been told to wait over there. For the man who's been asked to show proof, again and again, just to be seen. This is for the guest who was never offered the champagne, never offered the smile, never offered the benefit of the doubt." She stepped back then, allowing the words to settle like dust after a quiet storm. The crowd didn't erupt into applause. That wasn't the energy in the room. What filled the space was something heavier, something more honest, reflection, and beneath that, something else, respect. Because Naomi hadn't just corrected an injustice, She'd reset the tone for what excellence truly meant. She hadn't come for revenge. She had come to build a new foundation. Right on top of the cracks they thought no one would notice. And as she turned to leave, her final words rang not as a threat, but as a promise. "Let this be the beginning," she said. "Not of a brand, not of a building, but of a better way to see each other, a better way to listen, and a better way to lead." With that, she nodded to the staff, gave a small smile to Ellen, and walked through the revolving doors, not out of the spotlight, but into legacy. And for the first time in a long time, the hotel didn't just look expensive, it felt honest. If this story moved you, if it made you think or feel something real, like, share, subscribe, and thank you for watching.